show you the way to go. Let me show you.
Wow, who said that? Well, that's where I'm coming from. If you didn't know, that's Rahim Islam. I was at an address a couple of months ago, and the people want to know a little bit about me, so I gave them a little bit of information about me. That's Rahim Islam speaking. And you're listening to Universally Speaking, and with Rahim Islam on 860 AM WNOV, the voice in Milwaukee black community. That really kind of set me back there. I'm here also with my co-host, Tosha Davis.
Hello, Rahim.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing better. I'm kind of like, they kind of put me down a little bit when I heard that, but
that's powerful.
Is it?
That's powerful.
Well, and I guess I just left a meeting earlier. We should have put that on Facebook.
Oh,
now see there. Come on now.
How you know it's not on Facebook?
Did you take a picture? You did? You must have snuck a picture then. I didn't know that was happening. But no, we just had a meeting, and when we was concluding the meeting, I felt myself getting more riled up in the conversation, and I concluded that I'm a little crazy, and because these things excite me. Trying to organize our community, trying to make a difference, is really because the tremendous gift that's been given to me. And you heard a little bit about it, but I don't look at those as bad things in respect to many of our families are have stories like that.
Yes, we do.
I mean, just too many of our children are born in unstable environments where, but guess what? The thing of it is the beautiful thing is that they still are not damaged.
We persevere.
Yeah, I mean, so that's one of the reasons why I wanted people to kind of know who they see me with this suit on every day, and they think that, life has been so sweet to me, and they have no idea who I am and what I've been through, and nor should they, have the understanding until I've kind of shared with them. So I wanted to share them with them a little bit about myself, and as we go on, if you're reading in any of the newspapers, the Courier, the Community Journal, the Milwaukee Times, that column is Universally Speaking. Universally Speaking. And this article in running now, we're running two parts of the article. It's called "We're All Accountable to the Movement."
What does that mean? What does it mean?
Well, what I try to share with one is that the movement has been a movement since we've arrived here in America. Black people coming into America. And somebody was telling me about the first ship that black people came in, the first slave ship that black people came in America. And just not to insult my religious community, I won't say what the name of that ship was. But
well, some people might need to know.
Well, I'm gonna leave that alone.
All right. Well, I said this show was unedited, unfiltered,
well, I'm gonna
unapologetic.
I'm gonna leave that alone.
Okay.
I'm gonna leave that
Okay.
alone, and I'm just gonna be a little bit smart about that.
Okay. All right.
But the first ship, since we've come here in America, the first ship, we've been resisting to become enslaved. We've been resisting the oppression. We've been resisting the torture, the humiliation. We've been resisting all of these things that have been done to us since we've been here for almost 400 years. So the movement is the self-determination of black people in America.
Okay.
That's the movement.
Self-determination.
Right. Determine our own destiny. Controlling our own destiny, controlling the faculties and the systems that control our destiny, and being a free American. So one, legally free. We fought for a couple hundred years to get out of the oppressed. I call it and I will never, ever, ever not call it the American institution of slavery. All right, I'm gonna go. Now I'm gonna be a little bit.
Okay,
Now you
go
got
ahead.
me
All
excited.
right, good.
All right,
All right.
all right. Now I'm gonna talk. I'm gonna say that. All right. I'll never take America off the hook for what it did to our people and to our ancestors, because I believe fundamentally where you start is important, is critical. So you're here with Rahim Islam and Tosha Davis, and we're talking about Universally Speaking, which is our radio program, and I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to be back here in Milwaukee. I'm glad to be back on WNOV, thanking our beloved brother Gerald Jones and the WNOV family. And we're going to talk a little bit more about where we're all accountable to the movement when we come back. But we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back. Thank you.
Let me show you the way to go. Let me show you.
Welcome back to Universally Speaking with Rahim Islam. I'm Tosha Davis, your co-host for this afternoon. We were having a lively discussion before we went to break, and you were explaining what the movement was, Rahim, but I'm still a little curious. Who are we in that we're all accountable? Who is we?
Well, the we is, I talked about the movement being the self-determination of black people in America. That's the movement, and that will never end until we achieve that dream, that goal. And the we is those who have the capacity to understand that, those who have the means to contribute to that, those who have the heart and the courage to talk about that and to fight for that. That's who the we are. So that's anybody who fits that bill. If you have any kind of capacity to deal with the issue, whether it's educational capacity, whether it's financial capacity, whether it's intellectual capacity, whether it's political capacity, we need people who have capacity, black people with capacity, those who have been given much is expected from them. And so if you've been given capacity in the area of financial capacity, you've been given a voice to speak, you've been given the ability to achieve things in this society, then you have to give back. You owe it to the movement. And I can guarantee you that there's not a gain for a black man in America that hasn't been won because somebody paved the way. Somebody sacrificed and gave up their dignity, their lives, their sweat and their blood for us to be in the position that we're in today.
So basically, in a nutshell, we are the ones that we've been waiting for.
Especially those who got some capacity.
All right.
Those who got just some capacity. Then you have to be you have to be accountable to the movement. And so if you think you've gotten past this situation and you think you're high and mighty, you don't need it, and you think you don't owe nobody anything, well, you're dead wrong. You owe your whole existence, your whole life to all those people who came before you, our ancestors. And I'll take a page out of Kenny Gamble's book. He says all the time, he says, our ancestors are gone. He says, but I am going to be their representative. I am their representative to ensure that I'm speaking for them when they can no longer speak for themselves. And if you're in sports, you're in politics, you're in education, you're in finance, you're in business, whatever you're in, if you're a black man in America, you owe a significant debt to our ancestors.
I was looking at something the other day on some social media. I can't remember what it was, but someone had posted, when we cross over, regardless of what your religious belief is, what will you say to the ancestors was your contribution?
You know what I'll say? They'll see me all tired and worn down, and they'll say,
Some
you know what?
bruises, some cuts.
They'll say, welcome, brother. Welcome to have you, because I am not going to leave anything on the table. I am not leaving anything. I don't want to hear about, oh, well, my family and my children and my wife and my whatever. I don't want to hear it. I'm not going to be satisfied. I'm not going to be comfortable until we can change the conditions of more than just my children.
Right.
That's why we have our schools. That's why we're trying to impart that kind of concept into our schools, the Universal Academy for the College Bound, and our two schools. We got to save our children. We have to save our babies. We have to save our community. And so, when I transition, trust me, it's gonna be well deserved. I am not leaving any ounce. Woulda, coulda, shoulda will not be a part of my conversation.
Okay, so it made me stop and think, though, how many of us have thought about that? What is it that we will say to the elders? What is it that we would say now? I think about my grandmother, who is 87 years old, and I look at all the things she did and imparted in me. I want to be able to say to her now, while she's still living, what I'm doing for everything that she's done for me. And even if you don't have a grandmother, there were people that paved the way for all of us. So we have to make sure that we're doing something.
Well, I think the closest thing that we have, again, you're listening to Universally Speaking, 860 AM WNOV, The Voice. And you can call in at 414-444-5250. We will take your phone calls, 414-444-5250. The movement is ongoing, and the movement will never stop. And that's really the movement to get self-determination for black people. But one of the things that I wanted to, in my article, and I would love for people to read the article, because I'm not just writing it just to be writing it. I'm hoping that you read, and there's a message in this writing. And the message that we try to articulate in this we're all accountable to the movement, is that there was a movement. And this movement produced significant amounts of gains. But it didn't come without a lot of sacrifice. It didn't come with a lot of people working either organized in an organized way or an unorganized way. And when I say an organized way, where there was a stated agenda, but there were literally thousands of people around the country who said enough was enough and were fighting individual fights within their locale. But they all was aligned to the rights, the civil rights of the black man in America, which contribute to a massive public opinion that allow for those who were organized to deal with the issues that ultimately created civil rights acts of the 60s that produced massive changes for the black man in America. But again, like I said earlier, and I have written in with Brown versus the Board of Education, none of these were the destination. None of these legislations, none of these legal rulings were perfect. They were just a step in the right direction. They do not represent a victory. If anything, if the victory if they represent was short-lived, because many of the issues we're dealing with today is almost if these acts never took place. I talk about Brown versus Board of Education and talk about one, there was 100 years in the making.
It didn't just happen overnight.
No, it was 100 years in the making. There was at least 9 or 10 legal challenges against separate but equal the concept. Literally 100 years, 9 different arguments, legal challenges against that concept that produced Brown versus Board of Education. And what was fundamentally flawed in that concept was not looking at the equitable, the equity of funding, the equity of inferior versus superior. We took and ran with superior language and inferior language, but never really described why.
What that was, right.
Right. Our schools weren't inferior because we were inhabited in them, because there were black teachers and black principals and black students. No, they weren't inferior because of that. But if you didn't explain that, you would, if somebody came from somewhere else and was to review that, you would fundamentally believe that there was something inferior with black people. No, it is still today one of the biggest gaps, the academic gap today, we're looking at, and I have probably 9 different pieces of the gap that creates the academic gap that we find, that the disparities in education today. The number one gap is still today in 2014 is a funding gap. There's a vast disparity between the schools in Milwaukee public schools, and the schools outside of Milwaukee or private schools. There's a vast disparity between urban schools and where we are populated in America, and basically 75% of our people live in 31 cities. So we didn't integrate. We're probably more segregated now because instead of being in large populations in metropolitan areas, we're relegated to a very small, a few metropolitan areas. That's where the majority of us are. So we didn't even achieve integration. So, but the bottom line is that in those areas we find the same playbook. We see failing school districts. We see in massive incarcerations. We see in massive levels of unemployment. We're seeing all these kind of issues. And so the bottom line is that the movement continues and will continue. And you, black man and black woman, I don't care about your problems. I don't care about you've been there, done that. I don't care about what excuse that you can make up in your mind that says you're not going to be a part of the movement. You have to be a part of the movement, or you're a traitor. Bottom line.
Okay.
Wow. I'm sorry, I'm getting too hyped.
414.
I'm getting
444
too hyped.
5250. Any traders out there?
Give me some water. Give me some ice water. I'm getting too excited.
Any traders out there? Please, you're listening to Universally Speaking with Rahim Islam on 860 AM WNOV, The Voice. Let's talk about that. Let's piggyback on that a little bit. So, anybody who isn't down with the movement, who might that be? Who might that be?
Well, it's first of all, let me just be fair. We've had too long of a period. Right now, most of our discussion about the movement probably was the remarkable and unbelievable 60s that took place, where we had unbelievable gains. But again, it should not have been. We should be having those gains, talking about them 50 years ago.
Right. They were a step.
There should have been 70s gains, and 80s gains, and 90s gains. And then we would have built on the 60s gains, and those will continue and continue. But it's not like one and done. And so right now, we've created a way of life that is not the way of life that our ancestors and our community was participating in the 60s. They were a little bit more vocal, a little more fighting, they're a little more agitated, they're a little more angry. They were fighting an enemy that was right there in front of them. And so we now have to because we have the issues that are the same, or if not worse, we now have to we got to rebuild those muscles. We got to rebuild those attitudes. We got to rebuild that infrastructure that allows us to fight back.
Okay. We have a caller on the line. Caller, thank you for calling. Universally Speaking with Rahim Islam.
I know what you're talking about. When the towers were bombed in New York, the president got on television and he made a statement. He said, either you're for us or you are against us. And that's what the statement that you're making. That if we're not involved in trying to do something to correct these epidemic problems that are occurring in our community, then if we're not working to solve them, then we're working to make them happen. So I understand exactly what you're saying. If people aren't for us, they are against us. If they're not for the movement, is what I'm trying to say. And if they're not trying to help, then they're hurting.
Well, and I think I wanted to be fair. And many people are doing what they think are in the best interest of themselves, their families. And so we've gotten away, though, from the best interest that's for myself is also the best interest for my community. it was the same. So we've gotten away from that, and the other thing is that there is a very tough situation when you see these mounting. I wrote an article called the paralysis of hopelessness, and in the paralysis of hopelessness, I just discussed how even the best amongst us have become hopeless because we do not see a vehicle to challenge some of these issues. And many of us who've gotten to be, 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s even say, it's just talk. People are just talking. There's nobody doing anything. And the young people today are like, I don't have it. We haven't seen voter turnout and voter participation as low as it's ever been. But this is across the board. It's in the white community and the black community. But I also always say that whatever's ailing the white community, if the white community catches a cold, we catch triple pneumonia. And so it's not good enough to say that, well, everybody else is doing it. Everybody else is getting it. We're getting it worse no matter what. So to everyone's defense, there is a justification or a reason why we haven't been able to mount a campaign. But we have to now, I'm saying, and we're using our schools, universal schools. We're going to use our schools as a catalyst, as a centerpiece for this movement that I'm describing, because it is a tool that we want to use, and it gives us the capacity to do two things. One, to address some of the short-term issues that we're dealing with and be a place and a focus and a hub for community change. But two, long-term, it can begin to change their behaviors and habits and teach and educate our young people so that they are owning the responsibility, they're owning the situation upon their maturity as young adults and adults.
Mr. Rahim, I like the idea of the schools because that's where it begins. A friend of mine said to me one time, he said, if they won't treat you right, what makes you think they're going to teach you right? And that's one of the things Carter G. Woodson said a long time ago, that the problems that we're seeing now, our education is making it necessary. So I think that schools that are teaching your philosophy and where you're coming from, because I read your articles in the newspaper and we've talked before.
So I got one person reading my. That's what I'm gonna build on you, brother. Thank you very much. I'm gonna try to get 2 next week.
Yes, sir, but
And that's how the movement. That's how the movement starts. I get 2, then I get 3, and then I get 4, and next thing you know, I got 40 and 50, and then we all align. I'm only saying a lot of the things I'm saying. I'm only saying what I've been told and what people have been telling me. So it's not like I'm kind of making up anything. I follow the great leaders of Martin Luther King. I really listen to them. I listen to Malcolm X. I listen to Elijah Muhammad. I listen to Muhammad Ali. I listen to our great Dick Gregory. I mean, I listen to so many people, and they're saying the same thing. It's all about black first. It's about being proud of who we are. It's accepting our own and doing for ourselves and not being apologetic about it. It's not racist. It's absolutely ignorant to do anything other than what we're doing. And so what I'm trying to do now is just as I use the voice that I have, and I'm a convert to these great people, and just now trying to promote these things that they've been saying for the last 100 years. And so it's nothing new. I'm not saying anything new. I'm just putting it in the context of my own experience.
Thank you, caller.
thank you.
I appreciate you. Thank you. And keep reading, man. Thank you. And share that with some other people, too, so I can get that number up.
Are you there?
Yes.
I'm the one who wrote that book, Why We Shouldn't Call Our Ancestors Slaves. And I believe that as long as we believe that we are the descendants of slaves, that throws a monkey wrench in our thought process and our self-esteem. So I think that, and you've got some copies of it.
And absolutely, and I have not used that word since then as well. Since I met you, I have not used that word.
Yes, sir.
And I also met another brother here in Milwaukee, and he had a book. Why do we call? Black power is black consciousness.
Right.
And that's another one. So I'm just repeating what other people are saying.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Again, we are here. You're listening to Universally Speaking with Rahim Islam. And we want to let you know that it's not just going to be Rahim in the
No,
studio
because
today
I'm gonna
talking.
bust the mic open.
We actually have some guests coming up after the break. We're going to be joined by Dr. Andrew Calhoun and Mr. Tyrone
And
Dumas.
Dr. Calhoun, I was caught by his column, Rebuilding Our Community. I mean, that's really, I mean, it's running with the pack, but the concept of rebuilding our community is the very focus that I believe fundamentally that you have to be able to do. You have to have it as a focus for us to be able to compete.
So after the break, we're going to come back. We're going to hear from our guests in our studio. And callers, we'd like to hear from you. Audience, you can reach us at 414-444-5250. Call in, share your thoughts, give us your feedback. You're listening to Universally Speaking with Rahim Islam on 860 AM WNOV, The Voice.
Let me show you the way to go. Let me show you.
Thank you for joining us. You are listening to Universally Speaking with Rahim Islam on 860 AM WNOV, The Voice. And you know what? I feel kind of special right now. I am in the studio with all men. We have some guests who have joined us, some more since we went on break. And we're going to have Rahim introduce us to our guests in just a minute, and they're going to start a discussion. Callers, we still have the lines open at 414-444-5250. Please call in and share your thoughts.
Well, I think we have three people that I want to include in this conversation with Universally Speaking. And this is about really two things. One, our community, and what are we doing trying to promote some of the positive things we're doing in the community to rebuild our community. And all three of these gentlemen are out there on the front line. First, I'd just like to, Dr. Calhoun, why don't you welcome you to the show and tell us a little about what you're doing and what's happening with you and how have you contributing to the. I know you want what side you on. So you're one of the people as part of the movement. So go ahead, talk to the listening audience and tell the people who don't know who you are, and what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Andrew Calhoun. I'm pastor of Grace Fellowship Church in Milwaukee, located on Port Washington Road. And I'm glad to be here with him and with other panelists, distinguished panelists. And I'm doing a lot of things in the community. I write for an article called Rebuilding Our Community with the Milwaukee Times. Also, I have a blog by the same name, Rebuilding Our Community. Also, I do a lot of different kind of writings and research work about education and where we need to go. I told a story about 2 weeks ago when I entertained candidate Mary Burke at my church about I was involved with things in the community for a long time. My mother used to have me a sign, vote here. I would carry the sign, vote here, even though I didn't know the impact of that. But we were trying to get the first African American to be elected sheriff in the state of Tennessee. And that happened. Dolphus Hicks was elected. It was by foot soldiering. It was by knocking on doors. It was taking souls to the polls. So it's always been in my blood to give back to the community and help better the community. So we've been constantly working in that part of the city to bring light to what we need to do, especially in education. Served 10 years as an academic dean in the tech college system here. So I know exactly the swing door, what it takes requirement for us to make that transition.
You talked about why do you say, for example, rebuild the community? What are you saying by rebuild the community? What does that mean?
Well, most of my articles is a collection of, I've written about 80 some of my articles. Every one is a snippet of something that we need to address, different kind of metaphor, how to look at it. Last week, the current one about running with the pack is to look at the issue of how track and field impacts and how if we can run track and field 4x100 and fill out the complicated issues of how to handle that teamwork, thinking ahead, getting your team members involved. Certainly, we can handle the problems we have in our community. My ending conclusion is that someone needs to pass the baton to us. And we need to be also, another article I talk about, we need to be at the table. I think one of Greg Lewis's famous is, if we're not at the table, then we're on the menu.
So that really speaks to structure, organization.
Correct.
And so, in many cases, where we've been involved in behavior that's anti-structure, anti-organization. And so, how do we address that?
Well, some of it because we have been deliberately eliminated from being the table. And that brings a lot of frustration. A lot of time we have a lot of conversation about what need to be done. The problem is we're not in a position or with the powers that be to try to help influence what that decision is going to be. I've seen it in higher education. People creating programs and hadn't even asked the potential students about the impact about this. We're just dreaming up something and thinking somebody's going to come to it. Why not actually invite the people who are going to be impacted about their opinion?
Sure. I call that structural bias. Brother Tyrone, Dumas.
Yes, sir.
Let's segue over to you. Tell our listening audience, and welcome to Universally Speaking. And I'm glad you're here. I met you and also Dr. Calhoun around the whole issue around education. But also, Dr. Calhoun, you're doing a ton of issue around community organizing. But Brother Dumas, tell us about who you are and what you spend most of your hours around.
Oh, okay. I got to do that concisely. Let me.
Well, in 2 hours or less.
Yes. Okay. Well, one of the things when we started the show, you played a piece that you were speaking on some life experiences you had. It was ironic that I had that same experience, and that actually changed my life around in 1969. We pretty much had a pretty good life. My mother was a business person, and she had business in Milwaukee and she got sick in 1969, and we lived for 6 months with no electricity, no gas, and no water for a month. And so I was a floundering kind of student for a while. I barely made it, but there was something that happened that made me realize that without an education, I would be poor for the rest of my life, and the system would treat me as if I was non-existent. And so it kind of turned me on. I graduated from West Division in 1970, and then I went on to get an associate's degree in architectural technology at MATC and a bachelor's in architecture from UWM. So it made me want something. And then there was a whole bunch of people in that pathway. You talk about community and community building. Between the number of men, all the men in the community that I came in, all of them were pushing me to be something. Even my friends who were stone gangsters, they took care of me, and they made sure that I went to school and I was taken care of. And so I'm very much, I love my community, I love my people, and I know that I come from a place that had some of the same issues we see today, but there was a different way we approach those that needed to move ahead and those that needed to go in places to represent and then come back with that representation to make change. And so I've been that kind of catalyst for a number of years. I adopted a class of kids in school at Dr. King since 1992, where I work with the kids, raise money for a civil rights tour to enlighten their minds. And actually, I'd be a while, I can't even figure out some days all that I do. But I just believe that with all I have, I can't take with me. So I want to make sure I leave as much of it here on earth. I always tell kids, I say, if I could cut your head open and pour it all in, it'd be over. And I say, see ya. But it ain't happening like that. It's one day at a time, 1 minute at a time. We got to learn from each other. We got to share with each other. And I've been able to do that in my lifetime. I just went back to school and finished in May. So that was a that was an experience for a 60-year-old to go to graduate school. But but I got enlightened more. I learned some new things. I can now communicate with my grandchildren because I didn't have a language for them. Now I can hang now. So I think I'm as versed as I need to be, as God has given me these skills and these talents and these treasures to be able to make sure that I give to my community all that I can while I'm here on earth.
Well, one of the things that I'm going to get to it a little bit more, talk about the specific types of education that, again, both of you are proponents of. And we live in an area, Milwaukee, in the Milwaukee metropolitan area, where probably is the largest in the country industrial base in the country deposit right here in this region. And the question is why do we have such high levels of unemployment in Milwaukee when I'm hearing the business community talk about how much the job market is creating and the gap of people to fill those jobs? Then what's happening? What's wrong? What's going wrong? Why is there not a connection, Dr. Calhoun? What's going on?
Well, for a while there was an abandonment from basic technical education. Had left completely from the public school system at all. From basic welding to just small stuff. Learn how to measure things. Those are the same fundamental skills you need to have when you go into technical training. You need to be able to measure stuff, building things, building trades, welding. You've got to be able to measure things. And when you abandon that completely, there's a emergence of some of that going back, coming back online, but it's not enough. At one time, just about every school system in America had part of the Tuskegee model, having technical education along with cognitive learning as well. We just completely threw that away. Now we come back to an era where we need those skills. We need that skill set, and it's basic fundamental to where we're at now. And the disconnect now between business and industry is that we have the labor force. The problem is we don't have the transit system that be able to make that connection. Julius Wilson wrote a book in Chicago, a 30-year study, that when work disappears. The people have not disappeared, but the work has migrated. But we have a transit system, be able to connect people at the hub back to where the work is at. So there's been abandonment. And now, secondly, the educational centers have also disappeared. They used to train people in the past. They have migrated out to where the industry has gone to. So you have this total disconnect of where the mass of people are, so they can't get training and they can't get the jobs.
So it sounds like under the bucket of I call it economic disinvestment in our communities that's taking place. You want to respond, Brother Dumas?
Yeah. When I one of the things when I was with MPS, back when I first came to MPS in the 90s, was we called it technical and trade education, STEM. It wasn't the STEM title at that point, but I went into architecture because mainly a shop class, metal shop, wood shop, drafting class, all of those classes I had in middle school that gave me a sense that I could draw, I could make something, I could build something. Remember that bringing that old metal tray home and Mama, look what I did, or that table you made. And, but those skills that I gained gave me something. Then we used to read the book about architecture and draft. I didn't meet an architect until I was in college. I had no idea what that person was, but yet I still wanted to be one. And so I think that was a disconnect, and I worked very hard during the tenure I was at MPS to try to put it back before before some of those things got dismantled again, because I could see the kids couldn't even did a hammer, didn't know what a different tips of a screwdriver were, or a drill set, and that they couldn't even do their own maintenance, and yet we could as a generation because those skills were inherent in our daily in our education. And so I think that disconnect. The second one is I don't think the transportation thing is an accident. I think that it's self-fulfilling for those communities that they make sure that they folk have jobs. And that your folks can't get out here, that they problem. They don't have a car and they can't get here. I'm not going to put up no money. Now, at one point, there was this cooperation. People used to actually put money in from suburban communities into these pools, and they'd pay for a bus. Milwaukee would pay. Bus come down in the city, pick up people, move them out, drop them off at points, and they spread out to all these various factory jobs. Then that money just dried up. Nobody has any money for that anymore. So I don't think it's accidental that we have some of these issues. It's just that how do I how do I bridge those gaps? Where do I find those funds? Where do I figure that out? See, and I proposed a jitney service. See, I proposed something that I learned when I went to South Africa and other places. I said, so why, if the bus system won't take you, why don't somebody create one of these van services? You can move people from the middle of the block to wherever you need to get them. So we're stuck in a system that says this is the way you move people from point A to point B. I'm saying then create another system.
Well, one of the things I don't want to lose point, though, of kind of the details of challenging, but I think that the overall piece that I want to leave with our listeners is the fact that the breadth of education has been shrinking significantly, where we want to be able to give children a balance of information that will allow them to grow and do some of the things we just described.
Right.
So whether it's going different pathways, but clearly, I mean, I was never a hand guy, but there was no prouder moment in my life than when I built that table that I was able to do, or when I was in home ec and I had able to actually, the cake didn't fall down on me, and I was actually able to see the cake done. So these kind of things were that was a part of education, and it no longer exists today. So,
Well, I think it's only been done in certain pockets. There are some communities that are thriving with the models,
Sure.
traditional models that
Sure.
are going forward because it reflects their community, and it is a leadership choice at that local level, school district. There are things that are happening, for example, in Oak Creek and Franklin, that are miles ahead of what's happening in inner city,
Right.
and it's by design, it's by choice, and it takes bold leadership to keep certain things in place.
Well, we at Universal Academy for College Bound, I mean, we fundamentally believe that our graduates from high school have 4 options. And then if those 4 options exist, then the question is, what does the inventory looks like to produce those options? One, college graduates. You know, we want not only college graduates, we just graduated our high school in one of our high schools in Philadelphia, and we had 97% graduation rate. But we're in our 3rd year. But graduation, college was, and 90% of them going to college. But not only college, but college of their choice. You know, so not just a 2-year college or some college. You know, a college that will choose them and be competitive with those really high quality seats around the country. Second is to continue their career training, because we do academy models and we do the kind of training you're describing, where people might not be, they might go into health related sciences, they might not even go there, but if they choose to, they have a leg up, because in addition to getting a dual degree or getting a dual enrollment and getting college credits,
Yes.
they're further along on the college path. Or 2, they get a year's certification in a trade, and they're able to continue their training, so they have a leg up there. The third option is, if they have to go into the labor market, they also can go into the labor market and be competitive. And the fourth, which is most anemic to the community piece you're describing, which is probably fundamental to everything we're doing, is increasing entrepreneurship, increasing business and entrepreneurship in the black community. And the only way we're going to do that to be successful long term is to create entrepreneurs. And so those are the 4 options for Universal scholars when they graduate our school. That's the game plan that we want to have for our scholars. But I want to. We have also here with us Minister Lewis, and I wanted to get him involved in the conversation. I want to keep this conversation alive around outcomes, around educational outcomes. But I want to also introduce Minister Lewis to Universally Speaking. Thanks for being here, brother. I really appreciate it. And tell us a little about who you are and what you're doing in the community, because this is all about community. This is all about all of us as a part of the movement. What we try now to do is promote and market and recruit others for the movement.
Well, I'm not on the level of these guys here, but
Oh, yes, you are. Don't even try. He's being humble. That's
well, I knew a little bit about education also. As a matter of fact, I was the communication coordinator for the Coalition for Peaceful Schools, an organization that was created by Lloyd Barbie when he sued the state in order to gain a desegregation posture in the city. And I know what desegregation did to our system. I think these guys were being kind of nice about what happened. You know, actually what happened is desegregation was a one-way movement. And all the young people who were doing well in schools in our community and really developing and having leadership abilities and leadership aspirations were shipped out to 3 schools on the outskirts of the city.
Sure.
And when that happened, our leadership development dwindled because they went to those other schools and they just became another student. They were at the low point of the totem pole. They never got to develop. They never got to be prime queens and kings, and never got to be captains of football teams and all those things. And it really diminished the leadership in our city as far as students were concerned. And so other students didn't have anybody to follow. And the other thing that happened is when they got out to these schools, they were not really represented in the classroom because all they talked about is what they hadn't done, what they hadn't been, and places they hadn't gone, and things they couldn't accomplish, and they were set aside right in the classroom. And so that's when our whole ability to advance, develop, accumulate education was really stymied, because at that point there was no reason for me to sit there and be interested in what any teacher was saying. So they got really bored. And now the reason I'm saying this is because if you tell me all I was a slave, and then they don't even tell us that anymore, if you tell me that all while I'm in school, I'm not really interested in listening to what you have to say.
Absolutely.
Because that's just a put down.
Right.
And
our children not even hearing that nonsense at all.
And at that point, I'm bored.
Right.
Now, you try to tell me these young kids who I see growing up in front of the TV, singing songs and rapping and poetry, and walking down the street and can recite a whole album, you trying to tell me they can't learn? I'm trying to say to you that we're not teaching them right. We have to have a different way of teaching our kids other than what is going on right now. And if that's not happening, it's not going to increase our ability to learn or be interested in school. I know that for a fact because I was there when all this happened. So
well, you're spending a lot of your time, and I didn't want to throw you into the whole education debate, but
well, that's okay. I like education.
Well, it's all part of the movement, though.
Yes, sir.
I mean, all the way describing different aspects of the movement, and we're going to talk a little bit later about how do we kind of pull all this together. But I know you from, and I want you to share with our listening audience what you're doing around your organization and why.
Well, you know, I'm the president of an organization called Pastors United. And Pastors United is an organization of faith leaders, community leaders, business people, medical people, scientists, researchers, centers of influence who have gathered together to talk about coming up with solutions for some of the problems in the city. And now we are about 300 or better.
Great.
As a matter of fact, 312 powerful men and women of God who are organizing, and our major thrust, first of all, we'd like to get this family structure back in place. Second of all, we have to talk about our health discrepancies. Third of all, we got to talk about economic development. And then there's crime and incarceration, education, and civic engagement. These are all items that we really hold very close to our heart, and we drive an agenda that's our agenda. All over the nation, there's not an agenda for us, and we have to apologize every time we try to make one. But we're not going to be apologetic about that. We need to have an agenda for folks who live in the inner city, black folks, minorities, poor folks, and we need to drive that agenda and not be apologetic about it, because nobody's speaking up for poor, nobody's speaking up for the black, and nobody's speaking up for people of color. And that's what we are mainly addressing in our Pastors United group. And that's not saying that we don't want other folks to help. But when you come to help, that don't mean you can take over. That means that we have to drive the agenda, and you support what we are driving.
Well, it's sad when you have to always do. You have to say when you're trying to do something for black people, you always got to say, "Oh, well, by the way, everybody else can come in. But we gotta, you know, we're so, like you said, there's no one voice speaking for us. When I was, we're going to take a break shortly, but before we go, we were talking about the movement, and in the 1960s, just to give you an idea of the type of energy that was moving, organized around dealing with the issue of civil rights for black people in America. You had the NAACP, and they were behind probably every successful legislation that have taken place, including Brown versus the Board of Education. They had been behind. You had the Nation of Islam. They had temples in almost every major city, and out of the Nation of Islam came people like Louis Farrakhan, came people like Muhammad Ali, came people like Malcolm X. I mean, this is the kind of activity was taking place in the '60s. You had CORE, Congress for the Racial Equality, and you had a number of different champions out of CORE that were actually focusing and pushing, fighting Jim Crowism in the South. You had the SCLC, which was basically the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and obviously there's no bigger, greater person coming out of that than Martin Luther King. You had Student SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. You had the Black Panthers. You had the Black Liberation Army. I mean, you just had tons of organizational power.
Southern leadership.
I didn't say
Yeah,
that
you
one.
said that.
Did I say? Go ahead. I mean,
one thing I wanted to say that is really interesting about what you described them. Right out of segregation, there was this collectivism that permeated the community, because all of us were in all these various groups. I was in group. We had a group called the Brotherhood. We started in college. We had all these groups, and they coalesced. We talked to each other. But you know what's evolved? Individualism has evolved because we became part of the American society.
There you go.
Right.
So again,
you lost this ability to somebody say, "Well, I'm doing my thing."
Right. Well, let me. I want to talk a little bit more about that, because that goes to the concept I talked about earlier about catching a cold, and we catching triple pneumonia. All right. Well, you listen to Universally Speaking with Rahim Islam and my co-host Tosha Davis, and I didn't even do my tag here, Tosha with a P. And we'll be right back, so stay with us. And also, don't forget, we need to hear from you. 414-444-5250. 414-444-5250. We'll be right back.
Let me show you the way to go. Let me show you.
Back, boy, I tell you, time is flying. I mean, we gotta probably get either more days or more hours. One, and I'm not sure. You listen to Universally Speaking with Rahim Islam and Tosha Davis. You're on 860 AM WNOV, The Voice. We want you to call in at 414-444-5250. That's 414-444-5250. And we're here in the studio. We're talking to Dr. Calhoun and Minister Lewis and Brother Tyrone Dumas. And we're talking about a couple things, but mainly around how do we rebuild our community. Our focus right now has been education and the type of education. During the break, Brother Dumas, you was talking about some skill sets that we need to acquire. Tell us a little bit more about that, because what we're going to do is we got a few more people in the studio we want to hear from. We want to try to give these three gentlemen some final thoughts.
Well, one of the things is I mentioned to Dr. Calhoun, there was a lecture that I saw from a guy by the name of Young Zhao, and he asked a question that was real critical. He said, if American education has been failing for the last 50 years, why are we still number one in the creation of most of everything you see in the world today? And one of the three things he said that was interesting that the world has not caught up on its own, even though they can produce all the engineers now, he said critical thinking, he said creativity, and he said obstinance. He said, because most of what we've been able to create and put into the world was out of the fact is, I don't like that. I can do something different. Oh, I don't believe you. We teach that in the way we are as Americans. And most of those places where they produce all these engineers and everything, they have conformity. You will follow this rule and that. And they said that's what separates us, and that's why we still are not. And they said it confounds people because they see all these negative statistics coming out, and
And
yet
see the
every
results.
time they look up, everything that's being created, whether it's Facebook, whether it's some new this, some that, is created by these American folk who dropped out of college. They didn't do this, or they didn't do that, or they started in their garage. Everybody thought they was crazy.
So creativity.
And so even that's why I think when I tell kids that, yeah, I want you to be an architect and engineer, but the electrician, the plumber, the carpenter, the HVAC guy, they got to build what I draw. They got to know what I know. So they are as important in the building of a community or in the building of a building as me who sits there and designs it. So it's all part of that togetherness and collectiveness.
We got a caller on the line. Let's get this caller, our engineer. Okay, are you there?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Brother Keon. I'm sorry. Brother Keon, how you doing, sir?
He doesn't have a mic.
I'm sorry.
Oh, brother. Okay. Okay. Good.
I'm sorry, I don't mean no disrespect.
No disrespect given. No, you okay, brother? Go ahead.
For the show,
Rahim Islam.
Mr. Rahim Islam, thank you very much, sir, for accepting my call. And it sounds like the last caller was Brother Oshi. If it was him, it sounds like his voice.
Well, Oshi is here. He's going to be speaking in a few minutes.
Okay, all right. I thought it was him when he got off the phone. But so I wanted to say, you have a wonderful show down to earth. Your guests, everybody's kind of like it is. The only thing I'm afraid of, the people that should be listening to the show, is not, because they listen to something else. They probably listen to music or whatever the case may be going on or whatever the case may be. And I was just thinking, get people that should be listening to your show and get this information that's very important, stuff like that. What about leaflets? I know they cost money too, okay? Just leaflets. Put on somebody's windshield, mailbox, or something like that. Insert it into the community journal or the other newspapers and the courier, especially. I'm just thinking, if you could just get that message out, so the people that should be listening to your show, that everything you stand is going to affect them big time, they should be listening. They're not.
Well, that's part of our challenge, and that's part of the struggle. And you're right. We have to increase listeners. We have to increase readership. So we're going to do that through our events. We got it, like you said, leaflets and other things. We're going to do some more promotional things. We're going to get a little bit more aggressive in our marketing and promotion of the show and of the radio station and all the mediums we have to communicate this movement. So that's part of it, and also word of mouth. If you can get other people to be a part of it and share with them, hold them down for a moment. I know that everybody's busy. Everybody got a whole lot of obstacles and a whole lot of things that want to take their attention. But you have to do that. So we have to do that. It was one. So if one does it, then two does it, then three does it. Next thing you know, we start to cook. So thank you very much, brother, for your comments, and also thank you for listening.
And one more thing before I go, if I can work with you on that monetary wise, want to have a campaign or something like that, you want to get the money to help you to put out information, I appreciate that.
All right, you talking my language, brother. But here's what we do. Just stay tuned. There's a couple things going to unfold over the next couple weeks to give you everybody an opportunity to participate. But thank you so much, and thank you for your commitment to what we're trying to do.
Thank you. Thank you for your guest.
Dr. Calhoun, I want to give us some parting words about where we're going, and specifically as we've been discussing, really around education and the rebuilding of our community.
Yes, I think one of I pulled an article this morning that last year, over 4 million African Americans who attended college last year. 450,000 were in grad schools last year, and that's an upswing from previous years. So people are getting the message about higher education, opportunities beyond that. More can be done. Preparing our kids for the future is critical. We got to get them on reading level of at least a third grade. Got to get them up to there because when they get third grade, they can be reading on third grade level. That's critical for their success in the future.
Huge.
Yeah, big part of it. In fact, Obama's new initiative, My Brother's Keeper, targets that third grade. We got to have them on reading level at third grade.
And lastly, Minister Lewis, you quickly went over 6 areas of concerns for Pastors United. Give those again, and then also talk about really quickly, because this is not going to be one and done. We're going to be at this for a minute. So we're going to have a number of different discussions with everybody to talk about what we're doing, how we're doing, and also, most importantly, how do we get moving, organizing ourselves. But we're going to tag along with some of the things you're doing already. But go ahead.
Well,
talk about our agenda.
The major thrust, first of all, was getting the family back together, family structure. And secondly was health and wellness. Thirdly was economic development, getting some money in this area. Fourth was crime and incarceration. We know what's going on there. Education is always a key element in our progress or lack of progress. And finally, civic engagement, just getting people to get to know who can be at the table to support them and the issues that are providing obstacles for us.
And you know what? And that's not in order of priority, though, is it?
Yeah, that's what the preachers.
This is their priority?
That was priority.
Okay, because you know what? Because I think they so like maybe 1 and 1A and 1B
Yes,
and 1C
sir. Yes, sir.
and
Yes,
1D. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
absolutely.
As opposed to 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. You know what I mean?
That's,
Because
that's why I'm anxious to work
Right.
with you, Brother Rahim, because we have this thing already going, and we'd like to attach along with what you're doing and make sure that See, you can't negotiate from a position of weakness.
Right.
You got to have some power.
Right.
And the only power we have right now is in numbers. We don't have much money. So we have to have all these entities together, these strong entities,
Right.
so that we can negotiate from a position that would make a difference.
wherever we have capacity in our community,
Capacity.
we have to bring it together.
Yes, sir.
So if there's the alliance of pastors, if there's the alliance of medical doctors,
That's
if there's
right.
alliance of black journalists,
You
if
got
there's
it.
alliance of garbage workers,
You've been reading my
whatever,
notes.
wherever there's capacity, organized capacity, we have to bring that capacity together, especially to deal with these 6 issues you're talking about.
Yes, sir.
I mean, we're not going to deal with the family issue until we start to build the black man back into his rightful position.
Absolutely.
All right? And the black man have to be back in his rightful position. That means, and I wrote an article some time ago that our community is out of position, but by design. So, brother
design.
Brother Minister Lewis, we'll
You
be
still being nice.
right. Thank
All
you,
right.
thank you
Amen.
so much for your coming. And
All right.
what we're gonna do is transition to 2 other of our guests, and I want to thank Dr. Calhoun and Brother Tyrone Dumas. Just give you and Minister Lewis, just give you just a little bit of information about who they were and what they're doing. But you're gonna hear more and more because we're gonna use this show. We're going to use Universally Speaking. We're going to use the radio show. We're going to use Universal Schools. And we're going to assist the black community of Milwaukee of organizing itself to be able to combat itself against some of these monstrous issues we're dealing with, restoring the black family back into its rightful position, dealing with the health and wellness of our community, dealing with the economics of our community. Stop this school to prison pipeline. Deal with the education system in a much more comprehensive way. And at last and but not least, it's not going to happen. It ain't going to happen. It won't happen if we're not all accountable to the movement. All right? And that was my article. And that was a heck of a tie-in, wasn't it? Come on, give me some claps. Come on, brother. Come on. That was a heck of a tie-in, right? I did
Nice
that. I did that on the fly,
yeah,
man.
that's great.
Come on,
That's
man.
great.
Come on.
That's
Y'all gotta
great
give it to
radio.
me. Right. But anyway, in the guests in the studio with me, I thank those guests, and in the studio now with me is my main man, my 2 main men, Brother Oshi And he already has his following out there.
I have no following.
Yes, he does. Oshi is well respected in the community. And Brother George, Professor, Doctor, Professor. It's very rarely that you talk about a football player. You start using these kind of terms. But Dr. George Koonce, both of you brothers are very good friends. I've only been knowing you for about a year, but it seems like I've known you all my life.
Right.
I mean, it feels like we've been brothers for life.
Yes.
So in a year, I guess it's biblical years.
Yeah,
so
right,
it's like 1,000 months.
Well, philosophically, we're in tune. See,
Right.
See, we want the same thing for our people, you know, and it may be some different ways about trying to get it, but basically, we have a love for our people. We want to make sure that we educate our children, inform our community, help those who can't help themselves, and particularly our men and our young women, and ultimately change the dynamic that is happening in our community. So we're on the same page on that.
Well, and Oshi, just briefly tell our listening audience who you are if they don't know who you are, and what's your focus at? Because I mean, most people that I run into know you have been a champion for our community, for trying to get us as black people to think black, to value who we are. So talk a little bit more about that for me, please.
Well, what I've always strived for is to elevate and raise our consciousness. I understand that conditions shape conduct and consciousness. Conditions shape conduct and consciousness. What is the conditions in our community? Are they good or bad? And of course, if you're honest, you'll say that they're bad. What is the conduct towards each other? It's also bad. Why? Because we lack consciousness. And consciousness is more than just awareness. And if we truly understood that, then we wouldn't behave the way we behave. It would be very easy for us to understand who to vote for. It'd be more important for us how we spend our money, who we spend our money with. So all that has to do with the elevation of our consciousness. And the only way that happens is through seeking and acquiring information and knowledge. And it's there. It's not like, just like the Hidden Colors, and I'm going to mention that the Hidden Colors 3 is out, but
I would ask many people if they've seen 1 and 2.
Yeah, exactly. Probably some haven't even seen 1 and 2. Then they go pick that up.
Because 1 and 2 you can get that on Amazon.
Yeah.
But 1 and 2 are powerful, so I'm really interested in seeing 3.
Oh, 3 is dynamic. I've watched it a number of times already. At the firefighter building, we had a showing last week, and next week Tuesday, we're having a showing citywide at the Wisconsin Black Historical Society and the African American Women's Center. And of course, it is free and open to our public, because that's the main way that we can get the knowledge that we need that is outside of the educational system. Because when I was going to these schools and working with young people, I clearly understood that what I'm going to provide, what I'm going to bring, they would not get it in that school setting. So I knew that what I wanted to do was put something on their mind, to get them to think, be able to step outside the imposed boundaries that whites or Caucasians or Europeans have set for us, to begin to think clearly and objectively, and to begin to think for themselves.
Well, you know what? I tell you, Dr. Koonce, you absolutely are a role model.
Thank you, Rahim.
And clearly you are, because most of the young people today, the first thing they want to either be a rapper or they be in sports.
Right.
All right? But they don't understand the pathway of none of these, or the conclusion of many of these things, and especially in sports. And you are the role model. There is life after sports. One, to have a successful professional career.
Right.
But then also now to take it up a notch.
Right.
I mean, so I mean, tell.
Well, early on, I guess growing up in Eastern North Carolina, it was always presented to me that education is the ultimate equalizer. So no matter if I wanted to be an NFL player in the NBA, my mom and dad, especially my grandma, she felt as though I had to get a really good high school education, and with the hopes of going to college to get a college education. Because to truly embrace and take hold of the American dream, education has to be in the equation somewhere.
Absolutely.
Right. So, playing sports has allowed me to travel the world and earn a living for my family. But the most important thing When I look back over my career, as I reflect back, it wasn't winning Super Bowl 31 with the Green Bay Packers. It was walking across the stage over at Marquette, receiving my PhD in 2012. So I kind of feel a urge to,
And why is that?
in a burning.
Why is that? Why? What's the difference? Because both of them are great accomplishments,
Right.
but what's the difference between
Because one thing about sports, from my personal story, athletics kind of came kind of natural to me. The classroom part was a little bit more difficult. I had to work a whole lot harder,
you were
but
on your own too?
right on my own, because as a being playing in sports, you have a team to help you out.
Right, right.
But when you go in there to take the GMAT, or the LSAT or the ACT, it's all you. Right? When I go in there to defend my dissertation, it's all George Koonce. I can't defer to Reggie White or Brett Favre. So walking across that stage was everything, because the Green Bay Packers have been playing football since 1921. About 7,000 men has worn the green and gold. Only 2 has gone on to walk across that stage to receive a PhD.
Oh, that's
At
phenomenal,
East, at East
man.
Carolina, where I went to undergrad, we've been playing football at that university since 1932. There's only one to go on to receive a PhD. He's in this
See, Oshi,
studio
this is
with
what
you.
I'm talking about. See, I'm talking about. Here's what I'm thinking. Ask yourself this: whatever mediums are carrying information, what information are they carrying? All right, and then, but they surely not carrying the
No,
the
they're not-
unbelievable.
exactly. They don't hear that story.
The unbelievable courage and tenacity and greatness of our people to overcome obstacles beyond comprehension and to succeed in spite of the fact that there's so many landmines and so many potholes and so many traps and catch-22s to prevent Brother Koonce from becoming Dr. Koonce.
Right, right.
Football was supposed to be it. You ain't
Right.
supposed to think about nothing else.
You
I
should,
mean,
and you should be grateful you got that.
right. You come on, but to do what you've done is a major accomplishment. I'll give you one example. And nothing on the level of yours, but I dropped out of high school. Dropped out of high school. All right. I never seen the January of 9th grade. Never seen it. So I lived high school through all of my 9 children, but 5 of them went through high school. I lived high school through them. But one day I went back and took my GED. Took it. I was able to pass the GED in one day. No, months of studying and all that.
Right.
I go in there, sit for the GED, but I've got 2 degrees right now.
Right.
And I passed the CPA exam. Is 4 parts. And everybody say it's crazy to study for all 4 parts. You only study for 2 parts. I studied for all 4 parts, passed 3 parts, and came 2 points away from passing the 4th part. Well, then 3% of the population do that.
Right.
Now here's what. Now I am not no smart person by any stretch of the imagination, but I did what you did. I basically said, here's the challenge. I got to compete. Let me at it.
Right. And Rahim, and one of the things that really attracted me to Marion University, when we first met back in August with Hank Aaron and Mr. John Daniels.
Oh my God!
When I was working over at
I was like I was like a little
oh,
kid.
Hank
I know
Aaron.
that.
Yeah,
I was like a
yeah.
little kid. I'm
The first
sitting there.
time
I'm
the first
looking
time
at
I
Hank Aaron. I'm like,
So, Oshi, the first time I met Rahim, it was with Mr. John Daniels and Hank Aaron
Okay.
and Kenny Gamble, Mr. Kenny Gamble.
And me and George were sitting next to each other, so we
Right.
had our conversation,
Right.
and they had their conversation.
Right.
But go ahead.
So you kind of kind of planted a seed in me about how we're going to transform the community through education. So one of the things that really attracted me to Marion University was the opportunity to form partnerships. So I sat down with Bishop Daniels, and we came up with an initiative called Train Pulpit, Train Pew, meaning that we want our preachers, we want our pastors, we want our leadership in the church to be degreed. And therefore, the pew, the congregation will be degreed as well. And I'm excited that we're going to be bringing Marion University to 35th and Hampton basically to Holy Redeemer campus, basically giving you credit for work experience and life experience, helping you to get a college degree.
Well, one of the things that I've challenged our pastors, and I'm just so that's why I fell in love with my brother Minister Lewis, is because we have to take that pulpit and convert that conversation to a much more meaningful dialogue. Structurally, we have to deal with some structural issues to address the ills of our community. No question, I definitely believe that there's a spiritual component, and we got to pray more, and we got to do all those things. But we have to take some time and drive the congregation to areas where we have to, like building the family, rebuilding the family. You're not gonna do a drive-by with these things and expect to get some success. You're gonna have to structurally use every opportunity, like the brother talked about, getting more increased listeners. We got to have content. We got to have more listeners.
Right.
And that's going to happen. But, the reason why me and you also connect, because I did the same thing. I dropped out of high school. I went and got a GED.
Did you? So we GED buddies.
That's right. Because, here in Milwaukee, on King Drive, the OIC opened up on King Drive in the early 70s, on King Drive, and they started GED preparation. So I dropped out of high school, went to OIC to study to get my GED, where you get it at MATC. And that's how I got on the fire department, because had I not done that, I would not have been able to join the fire department.
But two things you described in that. One thing that what I would like to make sure the listening audience cannot just jump over the two things that I think are critical. One is OIC.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy behind OIC was the Reverend Leon Sullivan.
That's right.
Was
Great
an
man.
absolute phenomenal black man. Absolutely phenomenal black man. A preacher.
Yeah.
In fact, the funny thing is that my family was not religious at all. And I tell him my story that the lady down the street, she was the mother of 12 children. None of her children went to church with her. I went to church with her. And guess who baptized me? Reverend Leon Sullivan.
Is that right? Right on.
Is that unbelievable?
That's great.
And then the other piece that I think that we have to understand and put things in context is affirmative action.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal of affirmative action was to begin to right some of the wrongs that have been done to us as a people. Look, we're in the studio. I'm getting excited here now. I'm getting especially you start talking about Hank Aaron. Yeah, I mean, God Almighty, and what a humble man.
Yes,
unbelievable. You're listening to Universally Speaking with Rahim Islam, and we're here on WNOV, 860 AM. We want to just really. The Voice. We want to really thank my brother Gerald Jones for making this all happen for us. Because I'm in the studio with my main man Oshi and Dr. Koonce, and we're talking about our life struggles, our past, and our present, and most importantly, we're going to talk a little bit about our future. But we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back.
Show you the way to go. Let me show you.
You're listening to Universally Speaking. I was just getting into that music. That boy, Michael. I miss Michael Jackson. I'm telling you.
Well, they'll have a bunch of Michael songs that'll be coming out for the next few years. So
oh, yeah.
Something new by Michael Jackson that he hadn't performed, they just bring it out. This latest song.
But the only thing different is that one of the things that I kind of, when I listen to Michael's songs, I also envision myself dancing. So if it's a new song, I can't get to dance with it because he's no longer here. But boy, what a great talent, man! Unbelievable,
great entertainer,
unbelievable. You're listening to Universally Speaking with Rahim Islam. I just want to make sure on 860 AM WNOV, The Voice. 414-444-5250, 414-444-5250. And we're in the studios with Dr. George Koonce and Brother Oshi. We're talking about, Universally Speaking. And I want to remind everyone that we're also in a column weekly in the Courier, the Community Journal, and the Milwaukee Times. The Courier, the Community Journal, the Milwaukee Times. I really like to.
Isn't that interesting that we have 3 community newspapers here in Milwaukee? Milwaukee is such a dichotomous city. It's blatantly racist. It has defined lines of racism. You know, people here are terrible.
What that word means, please?
It says one thing, but it's another. You know, it's like a contradiction. You know, it's just funny. Like, you know, here in Milwaukee, started the school choice program.
Right.
You know, so I mean, there is some progressive people here, but it's also, it seems dead. It's one of the worst places for black people to live.
Well, I think the thing that we have to, and one of the things that I say, and I constantly write in all of my articles, and I will always hold America accountable for what it's done to us as a people. There's no question about it. It's done. Willie Lynch said, I think it was 1619, he said that if you follow this thing, if you do what I say, not only will beat back the resistance that you're receiving amongst your slaves, but you'll stop trying to break a slave, and you'll end up making a slave. And then making a slave is different than breaking a slave. Making a slave starts with the babies. Making a slave starts with the mind. Making a slave starts with a fundamental philosophy of black inferiority and white supremacy. So it's not what they're doing to us anymore. We got greatness all over the place. We could do something about this, but we're not going to be able to mount a campaign unless, in my humble opinion, we organize ourselves. So, Brother Koonce.
Yes.
You were here. I was hearing about a program that you were some successes you had at Holy Redeemer.
Right.
Won't you speak to that a little bit more about that? I want to make sure. And how do our listening audience participate if they're able to participate?
Well, basically what we're doing, we're going to bring Marian University to Holy Redeemer campus. We're going to have adjunct professors teaching adult students, anyone who sometimes life has a way of getting in the way. And when you graduate from high school and you start a family and you have aspirations to go to college, but it never happens.
Sure.
So what we're going to do is go through a whole portfolio process, evaluate what you've done over your life and your work experience, and give you credit towards a degree. We call it the 2+2 program, where you're able to earn up to 60 hours, and then you have about another 2 years to go before you graduate. And I think that's one way we can elevate our community, by educating folks and giving them an opportunity to get that college degree, so they could be legitimate, so they can go from working in the office for the city of Milwaukee for 25 years to being a supervisor.
Man, you hit the ground running, brother.
Well, we got to make a difference. Time is of the essence, and programs like this right here is really going to transform our community. And we are a private institution, but we're going to be giving the students that enroll a 40% discount. So
What is that?
That's a lot.
What does that mean?
About $200 of credit, and I think I'm still negotiating our president to try to get it up to 50% discount for anyone who's willing to take classes on Saturdays and Monday, with a cohort of 15 to 20 students. So we're very, very excited about it. I know Bishop Daniels is excited about it.
Yeah, I heard when I heard him speaking the other day, and he was extremely excited.
Right, he's going to go back to school as well. He's going to go back to college.
That was a heck of a challenge, too.
Right,
I love that.
Right. So,
How many credits for associates through Marion, Indiana, through this program? How many credits for an associate's with this program?
Well, we have we go through the evaluation process. You could get up to 96 credits, but someone that don't have any college experience can come in with 60 credits. But we have to have we have to go through the portfolio. We have to evaluate. They would have an advisor to go through the process to see that what they've done over their life is worthy of being credit.
Oshi, you're going to end up with a PhD. So
Yeah, right.
Submit your stuff.
A couple PhDs. Are you listening?
Life's work, huh?
You're listening to University Speaking with Rahim Islam, and also my co-host is Tosha Davis with a P at 8:60 a.m. WNOV, The Voice. And you still have time. We got about 10 more minutes. So if you're out there listening, call us up at 414-444-5250. That's 414-444-5250. Brother Oshi, we have been talking about some of the things you've been doing in public schools for some years, and some of the things you've been doing with our young people, independent of the schools. But generally, what is your vision? I mean, what is your vision? Because I want to see your vision achieved.
Well,
And I'm going to work very hard to achieve your vision. Tell me what your vision is.
well, what I would hope the outcome would be that we have students who are critical thinkers, who are independent thinkers, and who also are committed to forming coalitions and working together. They're not just going to school for themselves, so they can go get a job in some office and sit and overlook the lake or overlook the skyline, and possibly maybe get promoted by this, that, or the other. I'm hoping that students recognize the importance of utilizing what their skills set has and bringing others in with similar skill sets or even different skill sets and coming together to build something, coming together to work on something. Or
Like teams.
Yeah, exactly. Because we need everything, we need it all. There is no duplications of services. We need everything that we can get. Our problems are immense, and it won't be solved by those who we keep begging and pleading to solve them. They'll only be solved by us when we get our act together.
Do for self.
Exactly.
We have a caller. Let's go to the line right now. Let's hear from our caller.
Thank you. Good afternoon. This is Travis Koonce, a local author. And good afternoon, Brother Oshi.
Good afternoon, brother. How you doing?
I'm good. You hit on something just a moment or two ago about the fact of the matter that we have a lot of extreme thinkers, which we do need, but that's a part of the reality of the problem. We have exceeded their numbers of intelligent black people. We have so many smart black people here in Milwaukee who are going out all over the world and doing great things, but a lot of them stay in Milwaukee. Some leave, but some stay too. And that's a big part of the problem. It's a competition. And that's a part of what causes us to be kind of stagnant because so many people are interested. And I need no education. I got enough education. This is what I'm driving. This is what I'm wearing. I mean, it's a very competitive thing. Milwaukee is the Hollywood of the Midwest.
Really? Okay.
Thank you,
All right,
caller.
brother.
Well, I think.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that, here in Milwaukee, unfortunately, what we don't have is that kind of professional public sector class that you might find in some other urban areas, i.e., Atlanta,
Philadelphia.
D.C., Philadelphia,
Yeah.
Baltimore. We don't have that here in Milwaukee. And there are some, but it's a small group of brothers and sisters. And unfortunately, even that professional class that we do have, I would venture to say, doesn't really do what they should do, and that is reach back and bring others up and bring them along or show others how to do this. They pretty much network within themselves, But the real bottom line for us here in being in the situation that we here in Milwaukee, and believe me, all the things that are said about Milwaukee in a negative way is real, is true. I was born here. I've lived all my over 60 years here, with the exception of maybe a year or so in Norfolk, Virginia, and in Detroit. But I'll say this, it has been extremely difficult for us as a people here in Milwaukee, like on any other place, even though numerically we're starting to have the numbers, but yet it's not reflected in our ability to express ourselves fully because, this city is still run by a group of white folks who don't want to share, who don't want to give up any power, and who will continue to make the brothers and sisters in the city in a subservient position.
Well, I would say, and I would say that I would expand that from Milwaukee to the United States of America. Number one, and number two, power will never be given to anyone. You have to take it. A. Philip Randolph said, "There are no reserved seats at the table of life. You only get what you can take, and you can only keep what you can hold." So we've taken some things like some of the civil rights, but guess what? Almost all of those civil rights actions are now being reversed. So we took them, we organized, we took them, but we couldn't hold them. We couldn't build on them. And we cannot take anything, nor can we hold anything without organization. Everybody is organized in America. I mean, the craziest situations, the pedophiles, the people are doing all kinds of nonsense are organized.
Yeah.
And yet we don't want to organize.
Well,
So-
know what's interesting about us and our history is that when I talk about and I do a libation honoring our ancestors, and of course I always talk about ancient Kemet or Egypt because that was the height, the apex, the zenith of African high culture. And I've taught the young people that I've worked with over the years that society was not built by people enslaved.
Right.
Let's get that correct. Listening audience, let's get that correct. The ancient Kemetic society, the pyramids being built, the temples and tombs were all done before any person invaded Kemet or Egypt, okay? Let's be real. And that's a fact. But it was built on 4 things. Study. They studied everything. They studied the land. They studied the stars. They studied the heavens. They studied, of course, they lived on a river. So they had to study the time that the river was going to inundate, flood, and then when the river was going to recede because they also lived on a desert. So when the river it flooded, they went down into south 300-400 miles or further and cut out the stones, floated them downriver. I know I'm going up because the Nile flows from south to north, and that's when they built pyramids and temples and tombs. But when the river receded, that's when they got together to do their agricultural piece because they live on a desert, and they've got to make sure they'll have enough food to last them the years to come. So study, communications, cooperation, and organization. That's how they became great. They studied everything. They cooperated with one another. They didn't diss one another. They had cooperation. They communicated clearly with one another to build the way they built so perfectly to even this day. The pyramids line straightly due north. To this day, they're lined perfectly with Orion's belt in the sky. So then last, of course, organization. They were organized. Everyone understood what they were doing. Then once again, they were not built by people being enslaved. They were built by the people themselves in honor of their gods and honor of the pharaohs who some of the monuments and temples are named after.
Well, I think the one of the things that I constantly look at, I'm always constantly trying to understand, history and put it in perspective, and so Dr. Koonce, what motivates you? I mean, what gets you excited? I mean, what keeps you up at night, and what fuels?
Trying to make
to you, what fuels behind you? What's behind you?
Well, I'm very competitive. I would have never got into sports or went as far as I did if I wasn't competitive. But just trying to make a difference, trying to make the young boys and girls in the community in which I would have come from, let's say if I lived in Milwaukee, make their journey a little bit easier than what mine was. So therefore, to do that, I have to do everything I can to give them the resources and the tools so they can be successful.
And one of the things that Bishop Daniels told us one time, he says, the young people say, I can't hear what you're saying because I see what you're doing. And one of the things you talked about, how we're going to teach our young people teamwork. Well, how can we teach them teamwork when we're not acting as a team?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
They don't see evidence of it, so they seem like it's like, okay, we're going to fly down and fly in, we're going to parachute in, and we're going to parachute out.
Right.
They see no evidence of any consistent
Collaboration.
Right, collaboration. And so one of the things that I think is fundamental that we have to do when I speak about organizing, I'm not talking about just the civic engagement aspect of organizing, but I'm talking about the legacy that we leave behind. The benefits and the value of organizing is something that we have to now fundamentally challenge ourselves, because now we've been removed. The closest thing that we had to organization, and I write it in my article, is in the 60s. I mean, we had extreme views. We had people in the middle. We had a nonviolent approach. We had a violent approach. We had a youth approach. We had all kinds of ideas. We had a separate integration approach. We had a separatist approach. There were different approaches, but there was one theme that was tying all of those approaches together, and that was the self-determination of black people.
Yeah.
It was very clear, no matter what approach that you took, what approach you believed in, you fundamentally believe and aspire to this self-determination of black people. Well, today, we don't have that. We don't have that at all. So what we have to do, we have to create, I call it like a 10-lane highway. We have multiple traffic going down. We have the traffic from the academia coming in. We have the traffic from the civic, grassroots civic organizations. We have the traffic from the spiritual group. We have the traffic from the Afro-Center group. Whatever. Everybody has a lane on this highway because we all moving in the same direction. You're listening to Universally Speaking. I'm Rahim Islam. We have a listener on the phone. Let's go straight to that person.
Thank you for letting me in again. I wanted to say that somebody said that we don't work together, we don't get along together, and I think that the bottom line behind all of that is self-esteem. It's what we think of each other that allows us to work together or to not work together. And the problem with that is that the information that we are being fed is killing our self-esteem. So it's not our ability to think, and it's not something that is innately in us that prevents us from working together, but it's the information that we are using to try to work together that's preventing us from doing that. And the images
Absolutely, I agree 100%.
right, the images that we have of each other, those are images of inferiority, which y'all spoke to that earlier. And as long as, I want to say it again, the bottom line, I think, that's not the only thing, but the bottom line, the root, the core belief behind all of that is that we believe we're the descendants of an inferior people. And then all of that, we build on that, and that's what's preventing us from working together.
Oh, without question. Without
you.
question. Thank you very much for clarifying. I hope we didn't convey that. You're listening to Universally Speaking with Rahim Islam and my co-host Tosha Davis. We're in the studios here with Dr. Koonce and Brother Oshi. Let's do a quick wrap up. We gotta go. They get ready to put us out,
It
brothers.
always goes so fast.
Doesn't it? I told you.
Brother,
It goes
Dr.
tremendously
Koonce,
fast.
why don't you give us some
just,
parting words?
Well, it's just a pleasure to be here with you and Osi and all the things that you're trying to do for our community because, I've had a chance to go to Philadelphia to see the great work that you and Kenny Gamble are doing. And so I'm just excited that you have embraced our community. And hopefully you feel the same thing from us back to you.
Oh,
And,
absolutely. Like I said, we like brothers, man. I mean, no question about it. Brother Oshi?
Well, I echo that because I really thank Universal Company for doing what it's doing here in our city, the schools that you have, the message that you consistently bring through the Community Journal, Times, and the Milwaukee Courier, as well as this radio program every Friday. We need this because, to me, we're bombarded 24/7, 365 of images and notions of our inferiority. You, and what you're doing in your school that you develop, is chipping away at that, and you're chipping away with an axe, not a ice pick. You're chipping away with an axe, and I love it.
Well, thank you very much, brothers, and for those compliments. And Tosha, thank you very much. We got through another one.
My pleasure. We did.
Brother Gerald Jones, if you're listening, man, God bless you, man. Thank you very much, and thank you, WNOV family, for even allowing us to be a part of this family. We appreciate it, and we look forward to hearing from our listening audience and also being back on the radio in about 2 weeks. Thank you very much, and have a great evening.
Let me show you the way to go.